Good morning. So today we're going to discuss how we should allocate our available staff to hospitals and clinics around the country in preparation for influenza season. Um, we're going to explore the demographics of influenza mortality from a couple of different standpoints. And we're going to try to answer three main questions with our analysis. First, we're trying to answer who is the most susceptible to die of influenza. For the purpose of this analysis, we're going to be grouping this based on age groups because the data that was available. Second, we're going to identify where these individuals are located. And then finally, we're going to answer when flu deaths tend to peak around the U.S. And also when they tend to ebb and kind of drop. Bar chart over here to the right is not meant to really portray that much pertinent information. We're obviously going to dive into that a lot more deeply as we move through this. But what we're looking at here is just total flu deaths that have been observed from 2009 to 2017. And so we can kind of see that we're in the hundreds of thousands here, which kind of underscores the significance of making sure that we have hospitals and clinics staffed appropriately in order to mitigate the effects of the flu in this coming season. Excuse me. So what we're looking at here is just a simple breakdown of over 65 versus under 65 in terms of like where are these flu deaths happening and what age groups are these happening. So this larger red portion here, this is going to represent our population that is over 65 for the entire country. And then here we're looking at individuals that are under 65. And as we can see, it's fairly obvious, but individuals that are older are going to account for a much higher proportion of influenza deaths than individuals that are under 65. For that reason, states with higher numbers of these populations should be prioritized when we're deploying our staffing. One quick note, if a state reported less than 10 deaths for any given month from 2009 to 2017, the reporting years, the death count value reported for that month was suppressed in order to protect, identifying information. And so for that reason, Alaska and DC have been omitted from most of the data in this analysis because they didn't have enough deaths to really be recorded. So most of the deaths got suppressed. So they've been omitted for those reasons. So now that we've identified who is at risk, we need to take a look at where they are located. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at two different metrics for the different states in the U.S. The orange shading in the states that represents the average mortality rate for a state, which is just the percentage of individuals that are 65 and older. How many of them are in the state versus how many died from the flu. And then the blue circles that overlie those states, those are going to represent the total 65 plus population. So we're able to look at this in two different ways. One, which states have the highest percentage of 65 plus individuals dying, and also which states have the most 65 and older individuals, just kind of straight out. And what we see, California, Florida, Texas, New York, Pennsylvania, all those are going to have really high populations of 65 plus individuals, but where we see the highest mortality rates are going to be in states like New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Missouri, Massachusetts, and Colorado. We're going to look at these two metrics and kind of talk about like which one is more useful in terms of determining where we should send our staffing in a second. But I thought it was important to just at least kind of lay out the United States to see where these individuals are located. So To zero in on this a little bit more, again, looking into metrics of mortality rate and total population, this helps us visualize these two issues in a couple of different ways. And I think here's a good point to stop and think about which one of these may be more valuable. Um, if we're looking up here at mortality rate, we're going to see that New York, Tennessee, Hawaii, and Massachusetts, those are going to be the states with the highest mortality rate. However, when we come down here and look at total population, you see that the story is a little bit different in the sense that New York has 2.7 million individuals that are 65 years and older, whereas Tennessee has less than a million. California is going to have 4.5 million individuals. So even though their mortality rate is a little bit lower, that's a much higher number of individuals in California who are dying from the flu, despite having a lower mortality rate, just based on how many people there are in the state. Hawaii is not shown on this map here, but well, there's Hawaii. Hawaii has 206,000 individuals that are 65 plus. So they may have a high mortality rate, but the relative number of individuals who are dying from the flu are going to be way lower, just because of their lower population. So for that reason, total population is probably a better indicator of where staffing should be allocated, because there's going to be more people dying from the flu in those states, right? Regardless of mortality rate, the higher populations are going to have a higher risk. So now that we've got that kind of ironed out, in terms of what states are going to need the most assistance, or at least what metric we're going to use to determine which states need the most assistance, I want to turn now to look at when we should be deploying our staffing. So what we're looking at here is the total deaths, by month, from 2012 to 2017. And what we see in most of these calendar years is that in January, that's going to be when total deaths peak. Now this is showing a line for each state, but you can still kind of see that, like, the peak for 2015, it's very clear. 2014, 2013 as well. It's very clear that January is when deaths are going to spike in most states, and so we can safely say that January is going to be, quote unquote, the most deadly month. So for that reason, our recommendation is that medical staff should be in place by January, perhaps deploying them even in December so that they can be stationed and ready to go by the time January rolls around. Medical staff should also be prepared to remain stationed through March, because in some years, we can kind of see that in 2012, we see that in a much greater effect in 2016. There's a resurgence of the flu in March some years. And so to prepare for that kind of rebound infection, medical staff should be prepared to remain deployed until about March of each year. So as far as official recommendations, to recap, individuals 65 and older have the highest susceptibility to death by influenza. Therefore, what our official recommendations are is that we allocate supplemental staff to the states where the most deaths are happening. To more effectively do that, what we have here in this graph is a share of total flu deaths from 2009 to 2017 by state. What we can see, we've mentioned this before, but the states that have those highest populations of 65 plus individuals, those are going to be the states that have the highest share of flu deaths. Therefore, what the official recommendation is that we should allocate staffing based on the percentage of total flu deaths. So for example, of our total available staffing, California had 13% of total deaths across that time, so therefore California should get 13% of available medical staffing. New York had 9.84% of deaths, they should get 9.84% of staffing, and so on and so forth on down the line. Now, this can be, we can kind of change these numbers based on, top 10, top 25, however we want to allocate staff. But this gives us a good way to identify which states need the most help and allocate staffing appropriately. Thank you for your time.